a September 11th, 2001. A day that shook the world. But was it all as it seemed? Or was there an unseen conspiracy at play? In the early hours of a Tuesday morning, the world came to a halt as we bore witness to one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in history. The official narrative tells us that this was the work of Osama bin Laden and a group of Saudi hijackers who orchestrated a series of coordinated suicide attacks against the United States. On that fateful day, 4 passenger airlines were hijacked mid-flight. 2 of these aircraft were flown straight into the North and South Towers of the World Trade Center complex in New York City. Both towers collapsed within hours, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. The third plane crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, while the 4th, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers attempted to regain control from the hijackers. This is the account of events that most people are familiar with. It's a straightforward narrative of extremism and hatred, of a group of individuals who were willing to sacrifice their lives to inflict damage on a scale that was previously unimaginable. But there are those who believe that the story we've been told is just the tip of the iceberg, that there were other, more sinister forces at play on that day. Conspiracy theorists have proposed alternate explanations for the events of 9/11, theories that involve not just bin Laden and his crew, but also key figures within the US government itself. They suggest that the attacks were not the work of foreign terrorists, but instead the result of a carefully orchestrated plot involving insider knowledge by President George Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, and top Bush advisors. Some even go as far as to suggest that the attacks were orchestrated by Israel and that the Twin Towers were not brought down by the impact of the planes, but by a controlled demolition from bombs planted before the planes hit. So, were these attacks a straightforward act of terrorism, or was there more to the story? Conspiracy theorists don't buy the mainstream narrative. They believe in a more complex explanation. Let's dive into some of these theories. One widely propagated story is that President George Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, and top Bush advisors had insider knowledge of the attacks. Theorists argue that these key figures, for reasons swirling around political gain and oil interests, allowed the attacks to happen. Another set of theories involves anti-Semitic tropes. These narratives suggest that the attacks were orchestrated by Israel to provoke the US into wars in the Middle East. To state it clearly, these theories are built on age-old prejudices and lack definitive proof. Then we have the infamous jet fuel can't melt steel beams theory. This theory suggests that the Twin Towers were brought down by a controlled demolition with bombs planted before the planes hit. The rationale is that the fires caused by the jet fuel could not have been hot enough to melt the steel beams of the Twin Towers, and thus the collapse must have been a result of pre-planted explosives. It sounds plausible, right? But here's where things get tricky. The structural integrity of steel begins to diminish at temperatures far lower than its melting point. The fires, while not capable of melting the steel, could have weakened the structural integrity of the beams enough to cause a catastrophic failure. Each of these theories, as complex as they are, offer alternative explanations to the official narrative. They paint a picture of a world filled with shadowy figures, hidden agendas, and intricate plots. They offer an intricate web of connections and implications that go far beyond the accepted narrative. But how valid are these theories? Is there any truth to them? This is the question we must ask, and the answer may not be as simple as we would like. In the next scene, we'll start to untangle these theories and see just how much truth they hold. Let's continue our quest for understanding, peeling back the layers of the unseen conspiracy. Let's dive deeper and see if these theories hold up under scrutiny. One of the most recurring theories you'll hear about the September 11th tragedy is that jet fuel can't melt steel beams. This statement implies that the Twin Towers must have been brought down by a controlled demolition from bombs planted before the planes hit. But let's break it down. Jet fuel, when ignited, burns at around 1,500 degrees Celsius. Although this is below the melting point of steel, which is roughly 1,538 degrees Celsius, it doesn't mean that steel maintains its structural integrity at these high temperatures. Steel loses about half of its strength at temperatures around 650 degrees Celsius, far below the burning point of jet fuel. Furthermore, the fire in the Twin Towers wasn't just a jet fuel fire. The impact of the planes dislodged fireproofing materials from the steel columns, and the fires were further fed by the contents of the buildings themselves: office furniture, paper, carpets, and more. The fires were not evenly distributed, so the steel columns were heated unevenly. In certain areas, they began to bow and distort. This uneven heating, combined with the damage from the impact of the planes, led to the collapse of the towers. The columns didn't need to melt. They just had to weaken enough to buckle under the weight they were supporting. So when people say jet fuel can't melt steel beams, they're right. But they're missing the point. The steel didn't need to melt to bring down the buildings. It just needed to weaken, and that's exactly what happened. The 2006 Nova documentary provides a comprehensive explanation of this, debunking the theory once and for all. A conspiracy theory may seem intriguing, but it often crumbles under the weight of scientific analysis and factual evidence. So it seems the jet fuel theory doesn't quite hold up. But what about the Pentagon attack? Could a plane really have caused that damage? This is a question that has puzzled many since the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. Let's delve into this query and try to shed some light. Some theorists propose that it wasn't a hijacked airplane that crashed into the Pentagon, but some other entity entirely. An intriguing proposition, yet it raises more questions than it answers. For instance, if it wasn't American Airlines Flight 77 that crashed into the Pentagon, then what happened to the plane and all its passengers? Flight 77, a Boeing 757, was carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. If this plane did not crash into the Pentagon, then where did it go? And more importantly, what happened to all those people on board? The absence of a satisfactory answer to these questions is a considerable loophole in the theory that a plane did not hit the Pentagon. Moreover, what could have caused the damage to the Pentagon if not a plane? The impact hole in the Pentagon was approximately 90 feet wide, consistent with the wingspan of a Boeing 757. Also, the wreckage found at the scene included landing gears, a part of the fuselage, and even the black box, all identifiable parts of a Boeing 757. Finally, let's explore the notion of our government's supposed infallibility. It's easy to view our government as an omnipotent entity, a well-oiled machine that is precise and infallible. However, the reality is far from it. Governments, like any other institutions, are made up of people. And people, as we know, are prone to mistakes, errors in judgment, and yes, even incompetence. In many conspiracy theories, what is often labeled as a conspiracy is in fact a case of bureaucratic incompetence. It's a universal truth that where there are humans, there will be human error. It's not a malicious plot to deceive the masses, but a simple fact of life. Imagine for a moment a workplace scenario. A project fails not because of a sinister plot by colleagues, but due to miscommunication, lack of coordination, or simply because someone dropped the ball. Now, amplify this scenario to the scale of a government, and you begin to see the potential for things to go awry. The belief in government efficiency and capability can lead to unrealistic expectations and misconceptions. When something goes wrong, as it inevitably will, it's easy to jump to conclusions and search for a more complex explanation, often veering into the realm of conspiracy theories. The truth is, our government, while composed of many brilliant minds, is not immune to mistakes. It does not possess an all-knowing omnipotence that allows it to predict and prevent every possible negative outcome. To believe so is to set oneself up for disappointment and possibly paranoia. In conclusion, it's essential to remember that our government is a human institution, not a perfect machine. It's made up of people who are doing their best but are not immune to human error. The sooner we realize this, the less likely we are to fall into the trap of conspiracy theories. And so, it seems that many conspiracy theories might be born out of misconceptions and misunderstandings.